Discover the shocking moment. When my son's father-in-law exposed an unexpected truth about love. Tom wiped sweat from his brow as he finished tightening the last bolt on a rusty old truck. The clinking of his tools was a melody he loved, a comforting soundtrack to his humble life. He had built his garage from scratch, pouring himself into every repair, every customer interaction, for the sake of Ethan. Yet everything shifted the moment Ethan announced his engagement to Lily, Hank's daughter. Hank was a towering figure, wealth and power radiated from him, and Tom felt a creeping anxiety churning within. The very thought of standing in his lavish world, bases built on ornate extravagance, sent shivers down his spine. As the wedding day grew closer, Tom found himself grappling with unfamiliar feelings. At family gatherings, he felt like a specter in a glimmering, diamond-studded room. Hank's superiority ignited his anger, each smug smile scraping against the core of Tom's values: hard work, loyalty, dedication. The heavy air in the dining room was suffocating, laced with the scent of expensive perfume and polished wood. Tom clenched his fists under the table, an involuntary reaction against his own insecurities. Was he losing Ethan to a world that didn't understand the grit of a mechanic? What kind of father would he be if his son traded love for money and prestige? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Tom surveyed the table as Hank stood to give a toast. Laughter echoed, glasses clinked, but Tom felt the chaos simmer beneath the laughter. Hank slowly began sharing a story about his own father, whose pride had fractured their family. Tom's breath caught in his throat as Hank described the relentless pursuit of success, how it distanced him from those he loved. Could Tom's own pride push Ethan away? Stricken with a sudden surge of empathy, Tom stared into Hank's misty eyes, reflecting on moments shared with his son, tinkering under the hood, teaching him the fine art of fixing cars. Yet doubts twisted in his gut. What would this newfound wealth do to Ethan? Was it even possible for someone like him to offer the same life? Cold dread stole over him, gnawing at the edges of his resolve. The tension thickened. Suddenly, a tarnished heirloom key rolled across the table, its metallic sheen catching Tom's eye. Everyone paused, eyes tracing the key as if it were a punctuation mark in Hank's story, a symbol of deeper secrets tucked away, waiting for the right moment to unravel. Tom's heart raced, his mind racing along with it. What door would this key unlock? What truths could redefine everything he feared, everything he hoped for? The weight of anticipation hung heavy, pressing on Tom's shoulders like a vice, pushing him closer to a precipice of heartache or healing. How would this one revelation reshape their destinies? Could love truly triumph over the binding chains of pride? The uncertainty clung to him, a pulse of desperation that felt too potent to ignore. Hank's voice softened, and the clamor around the table quieted. He retrieved the key, its presence now commanding not just attention, but a deafening silence, as if the room itself understood the gravity of the moment. "This key," Hank said, his tone imbued with nostalgic weight, "once belonged to my father. He held on to it tightly, much like how he held on to his pride." Tom felt the heat in his chest flare, fueled by conflicting emotions. Here was Hank, the successful magnate, shedding layers of his armor, revealing vulnerabilities that mirrored his own. Yet, the key remained a stark reminder of the indelible differences between them. Could a mere object hold the power to reconcile their dissimilar lives? Hank continued, drawing everyone into a story lined with regret and acknowledgement. "I learned too late that wealth doesn't fill the void. It creates distance from the ones we love. My father used this key to lock away his shame, and I've spent years trying to unlock the door he sealed behind him. Caught in the gravity of Hank's confession, Tom couldn't ignore the rising tide of empathy swelling within him. Hank's vulnerability illuminated a shared human experience. Every man battling the ghosts of their previous decisions, yearning for something more than their status. But there was also an argument brewing within Tom, a nagging sense of inferiority creeping in. Was he destined to repeat those same mistakes with Ethan? Suddenly, Tom realized this was not just a moment of confession for Hank. It was a mirror for himself. That key didn't just represent Hank's failures. It also could be a tool for Tom, a key to unlock the honest dialogue he so desperately needed with his son. Would their conversations veer away from the surface, from the trivialities surrounding wealth and prestige, venturing instead into the depths of what truly mattered? Can it unlock what's hidden within us too? Tom wondered quietly, the question spiraling around his mind. He could no longer deny it. He had to approach Ethan, not as the struggling mechanic battling for his son's loyalty, but as a father willing to share his own truths, his fears, his insecurities, and the belief in their bond. As dinner concluded and laughter bubbled back to life around the table, Tom excused himself. The garage was dimly lit when he arrived, but the familiar scent of oil and metal enveloped him like an old friend. He had always buried himself between these walls, augmenting cars to escape his thoughts. Yet tonight he felt a resurgence within him, an awakening of sorts. He picked up a wrench, gripping it tightly, while contemplating the mechanics of his relationship with Ethan. Could he use the same hands that rebuilt engines to build bridges? The thought pulsed with energy that resonated in his bones. But the anxiety lingered, a shadow close behind. What would Ethan make of his father's unfolding vulnerabilities? Might this new approach bear fruit, or would it push his son further away into Hank's world? The weight of possibilities suffocated him. Time ticked, and anticipation brewed in the stillness of the garage. The moment felt ripe with impending reckoning. Just as clarity began to flourish, a rapid knock echoed through the air, a sound that shattered the recipe of his introspection. "Dad, can I talk to you?" came Ethan's voice, layered with urgency. The very essence of his son's plea ignited a flicker of hope in Tom's chest. But would he be ready to face that talk? Would they step through the door together into uncharted territory? The door stood open for exploration, yet trepidation loomed heavy. What secrets lay ahead, waiting to be unraveled? The garage door creaked open, letting in the cool night air, carrying with it the weight of Ethan's uncertainty. Tom felt the churning in his stomach. Was it fear or anticipation? He inhaled deeply, trying to steady himself. Facing his son meant confronting not just the conversation ahead, but the years of avoidance that had led them both to this juncture. "Yeah, of course," Tom called out, smoothing his hands on his jeans as if to wipe away the tension that had settled there. Ethan stepped inside, and the glow of the overhead lights caught the slight flush on his face. His son's expression was a blend of seriousness and something deeper, a desperate need that was palpable. "Dad, I need you to listen to me," Ethan began, his voice steady but lined with tremors of anxiety. "I've been thinking a lot about things. About us. I don't want to play the same game anymore, you know? The one where we pretend everything's fine when it isn't." There it was, the unspoken truth laid bare in the air between them. Tom felt the walls he had built around himself begin to crack. This was not just a plea for connection. It was an invitation to share their vulnerabilities. Could he respond in kind? "Ethan," he started, but the words hung helplessly. The mechanic in him wanted to fix what was broken immediately, but the father in him understood that healing was not so easily accomplished. "I've been afraid to talk about what's really going on. Every time I think about it, I worry you'll just pull away." Ethan shook his head, frustration flashing in his eyes. "That's part of the problem. You underestimate me. I'm not a kid anymore, and keep making decisions without sharing your thoughts just pushes me away. I see it now. I'm not just your son. I'm a person who wants to understand you." A rush of warmth surged through Tom. What a revelation! This was not just about him being the authoritative figure stripped of emotional connection. This was Ethan reaching out, expressing his desires to know more, to bridge the gap. Tom had feigned confidence as a father, but here was a son who wanted authenticity and honesty in return. "Okay," he managed, barely above a whisper. "But the truth is, I've been scared to show you my weaknesses. The things I struggle with, they make me feel smaller. I don't want you to think less of me." As he spoke, Tom's heart raced. Would this moment of honesty terrorize or liberate them? Sincerity carved an unfamiliar path. It was raw, unfiltered, and open to consequences. Ethan's brows knit together, and an understanding dawned that both men were not simply battling external pressures, but battling the limitations they had imposed upon one another. "I don't want to think less of you, Dad. I want to know all of you," Ethan said, his voice a steady rhythm, almost a lifebuoy for Tom amid the widening chasm of unspoken words and feelings. "Tell me what scares you. Share what you've kept locked up. Instead of secrets, let's have those conversations." Tom took a deep breath, sensing the gravity of the commitment required. This was the key he hadn't realized he was seeking, not just to unlock Ethan's heart, but his own. "All right, let's start. But promise me this won't be easy. I can't change overnight." "I'm not expecting miracles," Ethan retorted with a tremor of hope. "Just a little honesty. I can handle that." That spark ignited something stronger within Tom, a light pushing back against the shadows he had concealed for so long. But where had this newfound honesty led them? Would it ultimately deepen their connection or shred their historical fabric that held them together? Before he could explore his thoughts further, Ethan's phone chimed with a message, pulling them both back momentarily. "Sorry, I just need to check this," he said, glancing at the screen with a look that immediately tightened his features. With newfound determination and groundwork laid for fresh dialogues, that one glance propelled Tom to a new reality. What had Ethan's phone revealed? Would it lead them closer to each other or drive them apart just as they were starting to connect? Ethan hesitated, his face hardening, absorbing information Tom couldn't access. The tension escalated, threatening to unravel the sincerities they had begun to weave. This was not just a moment of exchange, but a pivotal precipice into unknown territory. What lay beyond that screen, a harbinger of yet another challenge? Tom stood frozen, his mind racing. Silently, he scrutinized Ethan's expression as a whirlwind of thoughts began to collide within him. The comfortable familiarity of their earlier discussion shifted, replaced by an unseen barrier erected by the currents of technology. He wanted to reach out, to ask Ethan what was so alarming, but a part of him hesitated, the part that wasn't yet ready to relinquish control. "What does it say?" Tom's voice was hoarse, carrying none of the authority he wished to project. It felt as if the question echoed off the garage walls, magnifying the tension. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he refocused on his phone, his facade of bravery momentarily cracking. It's from Jessica," he replied, the name hidden within layers of meaning and emotion that twisted in Tom's gut. Jessica. The girl Ethan often mentioned, but rarely discussed in detail. The fear in Ethan's voice struck Tom like a hammer against metal, echoing in his heart, sensing it too jarring to process what implications lay in the message. Tom debated whether to press for answers or to retreat back to the fragile ground they had just begun to build. "You can say it," Tom encouraged, trying to sound steady, though uncertainty rippled beneath his surface. "What does she say?" Ethan swiped the screen with an anxious finger. "It's about a party this weekend. She's inviting me as her date, but she says her dad wants to meet me first." Just 3 words twisted Tom's stomach, the overwhelming weight of dad clashing with the innermost thoughts of their discussion moments before. While this was a chance for Ethan, it felt like a threat, an encroachment on the partnership they were tentatively constructing. The revelations they were building together felt distinctly imperiled in the face of this social obligation. "Why would that worry you?" Tom probed, masking his own trepidation with an air of curiosity. His strategy shifted in real time. If he could get Ethan to open up about this, then perhaps they could keep the raw connection alive. What could he learn about his son's relationship through this lens? It was a delicate opportunity. Ethan exhaled, fumbling for words. "I think it means I need to be someone, more than just her boyfriend." He sat down, responses seeded in vulnerability. "I have to prove myself, like I'm in some test with him. Will he see me as enough?" As this honesty spilled forth from Ethan, Tom felt a strange connection pulled taut between them. It was that same feeling he had experienced while acknowledging his own fears just moments ago. "You already are enough," Tom asserted, leaning forward, urgency in his gaze. "But you have to understand, it won't just be about meeting expectations. It's about being true to who you are, not who you think they want you to be." I was stuck playing that role for too long. Tom's own past stung at his edges, grasping him in a reminder that amid loving intentions, authenticity often got tangled in expectations. He felt the haunting twinges of regret for allowing his past fears to influence his relationship with Ethan. The unspoken truth loomed. Could he guide Ethan towards a path he was still grappling to conquer himself? The intensity spurred both disappointment and hope within him, shrouding the garage in a sense of urgency that felt electric. What would happen this weekend if Ethan faced Jessica's dad? "Maybe I should just—" Ethan started, but Tom raised a hand, cutting him off. "No transformations overnight, remember? Start with a conversation, a real one. Let them see the person I'm starting to know." Ethan met his father's eyes, a flicker of determination ignited between them. "Okay, I'll try." But unseen burdens still loomed. The coming weekend bore the weight of tests they might not be ready for. As Tom watched his son stew in thought, he couldn't shake the feeling that these moments of learning would lead them both down a path of self-discovery and risk pushing them apart just as much. "Dad, what if I mess this up? What if I'm not enough?" Ethan's voice barely rose above a whisper, the flicker of doubt extinguishing the newly found flame of confidence. The question hung ominously in the air, threatening to unravel the fragile bond they had just begun to weave. Tom braced himself for the answer, his own fears coiling tighter around his chest. The truth was emerging, and it was both daunting and liberating. Would they find the strength to confront not just the upcoming challenge, but the specter of their past insecurities? And so, the garage air thickened with uncertainty, leaving Tom torn between guiding his son towards bravery and confronting his own unresolved shadows. What waited beyond this critical weekend that would reshape their relationship yet again? Tom paced the garage, the reverberations of Ethan's anxious question echoing in his mind. Each step held the weight of unresolved fears, both his own and those he sensed within his son. The tools hung silently on the walls. They were reminders of tasks half finished, of projects left to sit. Just like his relationship with Ethan, moments of growth remained pending, waiting for the right catalyst to spark connection. Ethan remained visibly stirred, glancing toward the door as if seeking an escape from the emotional tempest brewing inside him. Tom halted, drawing courage from a sudden urge to shift the atmosphere between them. "Let's take a step back," he suggested. "What if we think through how you want to handle this meeting with Jessica's dad?" Ethan regarded Tom with furrowed brows, confusion blending with vulnerability. "I don't even know what he expects. Do I just show up and introduce myself, or do I need to impress him?" "What do you want out of this meeting?" Tom countered, his voice steady but intuitively probing. "If you think about it, you have the opportunity to show who you really are, not just an impression of what you think he'll like." The notion struck a chord, amplifying the internal conflict gnawing at the edges of Tom's mind. He, too, had wrestled with figures of authority throughout his earlier years, facing the unyielding judgment that colored so many of his decisions. "I want him to see me as someone who cares about Jessica, the real me," Ethan admitted. There was a flicker of determination igniting his features, though the apprehension cast a shadow. But what if he sees right through me? Tom stepped closer, the distance shrinking as he delved into the emotional divide. You're more than just a title or expectation, Ethan. People sense authenticity. If you lead with honesty, you'll be fine. We all fear rejection, but it's often the fear of being genuine that holds us back the most. A subtle intensity grew between them, swirling in a mixture of vulnerability and kinship. Maybe you're right. Maybe I overthink things, Ethan said, sighing deeply, the tension ebbing slightly from his shoulders. Overthinking can trap us in cycles, Tom acknowledged, recalling times where he immobilized himself under similar pressures. But remember, even when fear is strong, our true selves are often hidden beneath. Focus on connection, not perfection. Perhaps allowing Ethan to navigate these emotions could teach Tom as much about courage as it would his son. A bittersweet realization unfolded. Tom had restricted himself all these years, fearing not just judgment, but confrontation with his own identity. What if exploring this new path alongside Ethan helped him finally release those long-repressed shadows? A sense of urgency prickled at Tom's fingers, compelling him to delve deeper. Want to do a little role play to prepare for the meeting? Ethan's expression brightened, the prospect shifting the weight of anxiety into something lighter. Seriously? Why not? Let's go through it together. Get you comfortable. I'll be Mr. Bradley, Tom said, stifling a grin at the irony of stepping into the shoes of the very authority he had avoided for so long. Laughter radiated softly from Ethan as he nodded, the shift signaling an unspoken affirmation of their budding trust. Okay, but you have to promise to go easy on me. I promise, Tom chuckled, a rush of warmth coursing through him. As they began to role-play, bantering back and forth, Tom felt his heart race, a new understanding blooming in the space between laughter and vulnerability. Together they stepped further into a landscape of honesty where fears could be named, mocked, and ultimately dismantled. Yet as their playful scene unfolded, Tom noticed the faces of both his past and present converging. A flicker of determination melded with trepidation in his gut, a reminder that while helping Ethan, he too might have to confront the specters of his own youth still lurking in every shadow. As they wrapped their session, both laughed with growing warmth, yet beneath the humor loomed the reality ahead. Would this weekend surface their fears, or could it become a transformative moment of unanticipated strength? Tom stopped momentarily, allowing the weight of the impending reality to linger. The question remained, would conquering these challenges build an unbreakable bond or unravel the delicate threads they had begun to weave? He wouldn't know until they faced it together, father and son, poised on the precipice of discovery. The morning sun filtered through the garage windows, casting a warm light over the scattered tools and remnants of old projects. Tom stood by the workbench, the remnants of last night's role-play still echoing through his mind. The air hung heavy with anticipation as he mentally prepared for the weekend. Ethan's upcoming meeting with Jessica's dad was more than just a pivotal moment for his son. It felt like a turning point in Tom's own journey as well. Every tool represented a promise. The screws, the hammers, they all held the potential for creation and completion. Yet, they also mirrored the incomplete experiences between him and Ethan, and Tom felt the pressure of necessity to attend to the most critical unfinished business, their connection as father and son. "Hey, Dad, can we go over our game plan one more time?" Ethan's voice broke through the haze of Tom's thoughts, a mix of excitement and anxiety evident in his tone. Tom turned, meeting Ethan's hopeful gaze. "Absolutely. What concerns do you have?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of nervousness. "What if I freeze up? I mean, what if Mr. Bradley just sees me as some kid who's dating his daughter without knowing anything about me?" Tom rubbed the side of his neck, recalling the fears of his youth, the feeling of being unworthy or unseen. "You've prepared well, Ethan. Remember, it's about making a human connection. When people feel valued, they often reciprocate. But what if he questions my intentions, or thinks I'm just some average guy? Tom sensed the underlying fear, the vulnerability cloaked in bravado. Then you'll show him you're more than that. Share the truth of who you are. His daughter chose you. That says a lot. Ethan leaned against the workbench, his shoulders relaxing slightly. Yeah, you're right. I just need to be me. Precisely. And being genuine has a way of disarming even the toughest critics. Tom realized the irony in his advice. He struggled with authenticity himself, allowing ghosts from his past to dictate his interactions. Perhaps by encouraging Ethan to confront his insecurities, he could also confront his. Let's do a mock meeting, just like last night, but this time I won't hold back, Tom suggested, the urgency rising within him. I'll play the part of Mr. Bradley to really help you prepare. Ethan chuckled nervously but nodded. All right, hit me with your best shot. As they prepared, Tom adopted a more serious demeanor, channeling every bit of authority he had once dreaded. So, Ethan, what are your plans with my daughter? He began, crossing his arms. Ethan gulped, his voice steady despite his internal struggle. My intention is to get to know Jessica better. I care about her and wanted to meet you to show that I'm committed. Committed? Tom leaned in, testing his son's confidence, but also pushing him to defend his stance. What does that mean exactly? There are plenty of young men out there. Ethan's brows knitted together before he replied. It means I'm serious about her, respecting her choices and family. I want to treat her well. I just wish... He hesitated, vulnerability cracking through his facade. I just don't want to let her down, or let your expectations push me away from being myself. In that moment, they were no longer merely father and son, but two individuals confronting the depths of their insecurities. Tom felt a wave of empathy envelop him, realizing Ethan was voicing struggles that mirrored his own fears from years past. Ethan, Tom said, his voice gentler, you have to trust that your authenticity is your strongest asset. You won't impress him with falsehoods. You'll connect through your truth. Ethan nodded, a flicker of determination igniting. Yeah, I'll show him who I really am. As they wrapped up the session, Tom could sense the shift, his own fears momentarily tossed aside for the sake of his son's growth. Yet the daunting reality of the approaching meeting loomed larger than ever. Tom's heart raced with a new urgency. Was he really prepared to face his own fears about judgment and vulnerability as Ethan took this first step toward forging his own path? The stakes were suddenly higher than he had anticipated. The questions spiraled in his mind. What truths would he discover about himself through Ethan's experience? And could their budding courage withstand the eventual confrontation with Mr. Bradley? The moment of truth drew nearer, and the air thrummed with tension, signaling that both father and son were on the brink of unimaginable growth. Tom stood at the threshold of the garage, still enveloped in the luminous morning light, but an internal storm raged within him. The weight of anticipation felt tangible, as if the air itself held them in a state of suspended understanding. Today wasn't merely about Ethan making a first impression. It resonated on a deeper level for Tom. As he watched his son meticulously prepare, a realization struck him. We are shaped by the moments we dare to face head-on. Ethan rifled through his notes, focusing intently on his dialogue for the meeting. Tom saw this as more than a meeting. It was Ethan's first step toward adult life, a critical transition that resonated with Tom's own past, fraught with missed opportunities. For years, Tom had hidden behind a veneer of practicality, avoiding emotional risk. But this moment demanded something different. He sensed the time had come for him to embrace vulnerability, to confront his own fears. Ethan, he said, his voice calmer than he felt, there's something I need to share. Ethan paused, glancing up, his curiosity piqued. What is it? I spent years worrying more about how I was perceived than cherishing genuine connections. I let my discomfort dictate my actions, especially with your mother." He stopped, the memories stirring unwelcome emotions. "It took me far too long to understand that being open and honest was my strongest path to connection. Not just with you, but with everyone." Ethan shifted, his brows knitting together in concern, but also in contemplation. "You mean you didn't always feel confident as well?" Tom's heart resonated with the truth of his confession. "Never. At your age, I was terrified of disappointing everyone, especially the people I loved. But often, it was that fear that kept me from being authentic." "Is that what you're worried about today? Disappointing Mr. Bradley?" Ethan asked, a hint of challenge in his tone. "Partly," Tom said, "but also about being so wrapped up in my fears that I lose sight of why we're going through this in the first place. This meeting is as much about your future as it is about how I present myself." Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing his father's words. "So we're both in this together." "Yes," Tom agreed, experiencing an unfamiliar sense of connection that filled an emotional gap between them. "You have the opportunity to redefine that experience. But I need to do the same." After a brief silence, Ethan exhaled, summoning bravery. "How do I do that, Dad?" Tom grinned, feeling the tide of emotional connection and support shift again. "You just have to trust yourself, and I'll be there, reminding you that everyone has doubts, even Mr. Bradley. Authenticity over appearances every time." Ethan brightened, a spark igniting in his eyes. "Let's do it. Let's be authentic." As the father and son drove to the cafe where they were meeting Mr. Bradley, they shared unglamorous tales from their past, a string of mishaps and learning moments. Tom understood now that vulnerability could be a strength. They could support each other through this rite of passage. Pulling into the parking lot, the cafe loomed ahead, brimming with life, laughter, and the sounds of clinking cups. Tom felt the urgency of a new beginning creeping into his energy. This wasn't just about evaluating Ethan's readiness, but also a test for himself. After a quick breath, he turned to Ethan. "Ready?" "More than ever," came Ethan's confident reply. As they stepped toward the entrance, Tom's heart thudded with a mixture of fear and excitement. This was their leap into the unknown, together. Then it occurred to him, just as they were about to cross the threshold. If Mr. Bradley perceived their honesty as weakness, what might that reveal about his own relationship with Jessica? What if today became a defining moment, establishing both the challenge and the connection that would ripple through their lives? With that realization, they stepped inside, reality merging with a cascade of possibilities. Would courage and authenticity win the day, illuminating the path to deeper connections? As they approached, Tom felt the gravity of potential changes looming close, both for Ethan and the unexpected truths that may emerge from Mr. Bradley's own perceptions. The air inside the cafe buzzed with energy, a stark contrast to the quiet anticipation they felt. Tom followed Ethan, their footsteps echoing softly on the wooden floor. Each step felt monumental, charged with dread and possibility. They scanned the room, searching for Mr. Bradley, and for a moment, Tom wished he could return to the comfort of anonymity, to hide from the impending judgment that loomed over both him and Ethan. As they settled at a small table tucked in the corner, Tom's instinct was to check his watch, to calculate the seconds until this meeting could confirm or shatter the fragile newfound connection he felt with Ethan. He couldn't remember feeling this exposed, and the caffeine-laden air mingled with his rising anxiety. "Dad, what if Mr. Bradley doesn't think I'm ready?" Ethan asked, fidgeting with his hands as if searching for strength in his own actions. "He will, as long as you believe in yourself," Tom replied, although he could not fully apply those words to himself. The specter of self-doubt clawed at the back of his mind. Who was he to talk about belief when he had spent years undermining his own potential? "Can I ask you something?" Ethan's voice brought Tom back to the moment. "Why do you care so much about what Mr. Bradley thinks?" The question struck Tom like a lightning bolt. He realized this wasn't merely about Ethan impressing his potential mentor. This was a reflection of Tom's unresolved battles with perception. Because I want him to see you as someone capable and worthy, but maybe I also want to be seen in that light. Ethan tilted his head, digesting the honesty. But isn't it unfair to put that on me? Maybe. And maybe it's time I stopped putting those expectations on us both. Tom leaned back, the admission leaving him feeling raw. It echoed in the dining space, almost painfully stark amid the cheerful clatter of mugs and laughter. He thought of Jessica and the countless expectations they had danced around, both of them trapped in roles they crafted for public approval rather than genuine intimacy. Mr. Bradley entered, cutting through the fog of Tom's thoughts. He moved with an air of authority, his presence palpable. He was the man with the keys to unlock doors Tom had feared to approach. A brief exchange of pleasantries with the waitress led him directly to their table. "Ethan." "Tom," he said, the warmth in his tone cloaking any judgment lurking beneath the surface. "It's great to meet you both." Tom nodded, trying to glean insight from Mr. Bradley's expression. Did he carry preconceived notions? Would he see Ethan's potential or Tom's fear-riddled facade? "Ready for our discussion?" Mr. Bradley asked, settling into his chair. Ethan cleared his throat, the nerves churning inside him. "Absolutely," came his determined reply, though Tom could still see flickers of uncertainty. A new realization tensed Tom's shoulders. This meeting wasn't only Ethan's evaluation, it was an opportunity for Tom to confront his fear of authority and judgment. After a dance of small talk, Mr. Bradley turned his focus to Ethan's achievements. Tom watched closely, observing how Ethan navigated the conversation, weaving confidence into his responses. He remembered his own youth, filled with stumbling attempts cloaked in insecurity. Yet here was Ethan, rising above, not just thriving, but embodying the very authenticity Tom craved. "Your dad mentioned you've been putting together a portfolio," Mr. Bradley acknowledged, a hint of respect coloring his voice. "I'd like to see it." The moment sparked a flicker of pride within Tom. This was Ethan's moment to shine, and he was finally ready to bask in it. Yet Tom couldn't shake the tension, feeling it twist and tighten like a noose around his resolve. What if Ethan faltered? Or worse, what if Mr. Bradley saw through the surface and struck at the heart of Tom's fears? A storm of thoughts erupted within him, the cafe fading into a blur. Every fear, every lingering doubt about himself surged to the forefront. As their exchange deepened, Tom understood the challenge ahead, to redefine not just how he related to Ethan, but also to Mr. Bradley. Each word spoken was a stepping stone towards realizing that vulnerability could indeed lay a foundation for strength, but the stakes were rising. How much of himself was he willing to expose, and what if that exposure challenged everything he thought he knew about himself? With Ethan's confidence rising alongside the tension in the air, a notion flickered on the verge of his consciousness. Perhaps it was time to advocate for both of them. But as he opened his mouth to speak, a question lingered. What would happen if he didn't just confront his fears, but also the realities that had shaped him? The moment of potential connection shimmered, just out of reach. As the conversation unfurled, Tom's mind raced, processing the moment as though it were a chessboard, each exchange a move that could either advance them toward victory or lead them into an unforeseen trap. He watched Mr. Bradley lean forward, eyes narrowing, a slight smile playing on his lips, captivated by Ethan's portfolio. "Impressive work," Mr. Bradley said, flipping through polished pages filled with Ethan's creativity. "You've captured not just the assignment, but your unique perspective." Tom felt a swell of pride, mingling with the debilitating anxiety that continued to coil around his chest. He had to remind himself that this was Ethan's success, not his to appropriate. But the weight of expectation, personal and familial, loomed heavy like thunderclouds, threatening to shatter the moment. And then, abruptly, Tom decided to speak. It was a deliberate push against the murmurs of self-doubt. "Ethan has a sharp eye for detail," he started, his voice steady. but what impresses me most is how he represents his thoughts in a way that feels authentic. Mr. Bradley's gaze shifted to Tom, studying him with an intensity that made the hairs on Tom's neck stand on edge. That's insightful, Tom. Trusting your instincts to convey authenticity is crucial. Tom's throat tightened. How could he engage on this level, speak about perspective, about authenticity, when he struggled to find it within himself? What right did he have to critique the fortitude with which Ethan approached this pivotal moment? Ethan noticed his father's hesitation, an unseen tension as palpable as the caffeine-scented air. It's taken me a while to appreciate that my work isn't just about aesthetic, it's about the narrative I want to share. He glanced at Tom, a moment of connection igniting between them, an acknowledgement of both shared struggle and triumph. Mr. Bradley nodded again, clearly intrigued. Excellent point, Ethan. Narrative is indeed a powerful tool in any creative work. It gives us insight into the artist's world. The discussion flowed. Questions bounced back and forth like a rallying volley demanding engagement. Tom noticed how fluidly Ethan was responding, an eagerness emerging from the confines of anxiety. Here was his son, articulate, confident, adept at weaving his thoughts into the fabric of the conversation. But in watching Ethan transform, Tom felt increasingly hollow. Why was he still sitting in the shadows of commendable accomplishments? This was not how he had envisioned himself at this pivotal junction of potential realization. Maybe you could expand your narrative further, Tom interjected, feeling bolder. Use personal experiences. Your journey could resonate even more with others. Ethan's eyes lit up with excitement, an avalanche of gratitude pouring from his expression. That's a great idea, Dad. I've been hesitant to share more of my story, worried it wouldn't be understood. Tom felt a warmth in this exchange, a melting point of their fears. Could it be their intertwined aspirations forging a path toward mutual understanding? Yet the undercurrent of his lingering doubts gnawed, as if taunting him for having the audacity to speak openly. All at once, Mr. Bradley turned to Tom. And what about you? Have you considered sharing your story as well? Caught off guard, the question hit Tom squarely in the chest. He fought to maintain composure as waves of vulnerability surged through him. The truth prickled behind his defenses, unbearable yet undeniable. My story? It's not as compelling, he stammered, felt the weight of judgment settle heavily on his shoulders. Your perspective matters, Tom. Growth comes through our experiences, even when they're not polished, Mr. Bradley suggested, his tone unwavering, urging him to explore the depths of his own narrative he had kept hidden. Tom's mind raced. This was no longer about Ethan. It was a call to arms for himself, to confront his fears, to define what authenticity meant beyond tangible success or acceptance. The cafe began to blur. The conversations around them faded into mere background noise. For the first time, Tom considered that he could rise beyond self-imposed limitations, that perhaps their stories, entwined, could offer them both a new lens through which to view their world. And just as clarity began to dawn, the door swung open. A harsh wind blew in, carrying the scent of rain and the sound of distant thunder, a reminder that other storms were brewing, both externally and within. In that moment, as Mr. Bradley awaited Tom's response, an unsettling realization took root. What if the questions probing at his consciousness were only the beginning? What if peeling back layers of his life revealed truths he wasn't prepared to face? As the tension hung thick in the air, Tom knew whether he accepted the challenge or recoiled was a choice that could alter the course of their lives. Tom inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the moment cling to him like the humidity filling the cafe. The reality of Mr. Bradley's question hung in the air, waiting for a response, but it stirred something profound within Tom, a uniting force, a call to self-acceptance that he could no longer ignore. Maybe my story isn't without merit, he began, his voice gaining strength as he continued. I spent years focused on what I perceived as success, working tirelessly to provide for my son. but in doing so, I often lost sight of the things that truly mattered: honesty and connection. Ethan glanced at his father, encouragement radiating from him, urging Tom to seize this moment. To feel like less than enough for someone else, that's a struggle I've carried for a long time. I can now see how avoiding vulnerability kept me trapped in the shadows of my own expectations. Mr. Bradley raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Tom, that's an important revelation. Authenticity isn't always about triumph. Sometimes it takes courage to show up with our flaws. As Tom spoke, he noticed a shift not just within himself, but in how Mr. Bradley was engaging with him. The air felt less weighted, as if they were uprooting the misunderstanding rooted in pride and fear. I excelled at the craft of mechanics, but often felt judged by an invisible standard, Tom continued. I confined myself to a space where I thought my value lay in achievements rather than relationships. So, instead of being fully present with my son, I became preoccupied with making him proud. I prioritized my pride over engaging him in meaningful conversations. Ethan's gaze softened, understanding intertwining with empathy. Dad, it's okay. I've found myself caught in that same cycle, fearing that if I don't intensely strive for success, I'll disappoint everyone. Exactly, Tom replied, feeling their connectedness strengthen. It's a slippery slope, isn't it? We're both so worried about perception that we risk losing authenticity and connection to the very people most important to us. Mr. Bradley nodded, clearly resonating with their exchange. The willingness to be vulnerable opens doors to deeper relationships. It fosters trust, which can lead to growth, not just in our personal lives, but professionally as well. This conversation felt transformative as Tom recognized the essence of what lay before him, a chance to redefine his relationship with Ethan through openness and honesty, weaving vulnerability into the fabric of their interactions. Perhaps this meeting isn't just about impressing you, Mr. Bradley, Ethan chimed in, his voice more confident than before. It's about understanding that we all bring our own stories to the table, experiences that make us who we are. A weight lifted, and the warmth from that connection flooded over Tom, feeling validated. This wasn't merely a chance to showcase their successes to one another, but rather to embrace their imperfections and acknowledge the unique journeys they each had undertaken. If I can show my son that showing up authentically is a strength rather than a weakness, maybe we can both find the courage needed to step into the world with confidence, Tom said, turning slightly to Ethan. I want you to see that real bravery lies in being true to yourself, not just what others expect of you. Suddenly the door swung open, and the wind swept through the cafe briskly, signaling a shift in energy. Tom felt a newfound resolve solidify within him, merging with the sense of accountability they both embraced. Daring to be understood, that's where growth begins, Mr. Bradley added, a hint of warmth in his tone. I can appreciate that. It resonates deeply. If you both devote yourselves to authenticity, I foresee significant paths unfolding for you. Just like that, clarity surged within the trio, creating palpable excitement in the air, not just for Ethan's future, but also for Tom's. Each moment seemed a stepping stone toward a courageous evolution. As the conversation continued to flow, Tom felt the first gusts of liberation urging him forward into a journey that challenged and fulfilled him simultaneously. The boundaries of his past fears were slowly disassembling, unveiling pristine opportunities for growth. Let's forge a new narrative, Tom suggested, his words tangling with a bright determination. One where we are guided by understanding instead of fear. When Ethan nodded, mirroring the newfound strength reflected in his father's eyes, Tom realized that they were embarking on a journey together, a bonding pathway threaded with vulnerability, trust, and authenticity. And with that, a fresh understanding blossomed between them, symbolizing not only the courage to show up as their most authentic selves, but assuring a future bathed in fulfillment and acceptance. One realization became clearer than ever. This moment was not just one for Ethan and Mr. Bradley. It was a pivotal milestone for Tom himself, marking the end of a decade-long journey veiled in insecurity. He had stepped away from that suffocating realm into an open space suffused with possibility and connection. At that very moment, Tom knew he had taken a significant leap toward becoming a person molded through experience rather than just expectation. And while the future remained uncertain, the clarity brought forth through vulnerability assured him. Together, with Ethan, they were ready to navigate whatever came next. As they exchanged glances of mutual encouragement, blocks of years filled with insecurity began to dissolve. The moment marked not just a new beginning for Ethan, but a blossoming of possibilities for Tom. A recognition of the power inherent in being unguarded, welcoming, and open to the journey that lay ahead. In a world often crowded with judgment, fear, and expectations, they had chosen a different path. They were ready to embrace their truth and let authenticity shape their lives as their journeys continued to intertwine. The door swung shut behind them, and together they turned toward the light, a welcoming ray of potential, shifting the landscape in the direction of destiny fleetingly embraced. The adventure to reclaim their authentic selves had begun, no longer bound by illusion but fortifying their bond, one tale at a time. And so, Tom felt an overwhelming sense of personal achievement settle in, the kind of fulfillment earned through gritty honesty, facing fears and nurturing connection that allowed him to boldly explore what it meant to truly be a father, a mechanic, and a man. Now was the moment of action. You need to subscribe now to stay connected and not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It truly makes a difference. Comment below with your reactions and theories about this powerful conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to understand the importance of vulnerability and authentic connection.